Hi everyone, my name is Anna Katz. I am an assistant curator at MOCA, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and here next to me we have Peter Shire, an artist who's Peter, I think as your warm reception indicates, all well know, is an artist whose work is the subject of a solo show just across the street at MOCA Pacific Design Center. Peter Shire, Naked is the Best Disguise. This is a show that focuses on Peter's work in craft and in design, in ceramics and in furniture, and also present some works on paper that give us some insight into Peter's process. So the show might in some ways belie that Peter also has an active practice that we would more readily and easily identify as art as such, sort of proper art. Peter is a sculptor, Peter has worked in glass, Peter has a long career now as a maker of large-scale outdoor public art installations. Peter paints on ceramic supports. But indeed, what our show presents is Peter's work in craft and in design. And in fact, it was really these questions, these sort of divisions, or the illusion of these divisions among disciplines is very much a kind of impetus for the show that we put together. The aim of the show, or the animating impulse of the show, is to delve into Peter's particular and idiosyncratic notion of objects like teapots and furniture as domestically scaled sculpture. So, the show is on view for just one more week until July 2nd. Peter, I can hardly believe that our run is almost over. It's been a pleasure for me to work with Peter on this show, so I'm really glad that we're doing this today. I want to thank you all for coming, thank my colleagues at MOCA and the Education Department who helped put this together, and the City of West Hollywood, which supports this program through WeHo Arts. So, what we're going to do today is I'm going to ask some questions of Peter. It's just a few questions. And then I hope that you'll have some questions for Peter. We'll turn it over to you for Q&A. And if you haven't yet had a chance to see the show, rest assured the museum is open until 6 p.m. this evening, so we can go across the street to see it for the first time or again. So, you ready for me? Okay.
We'll see.
All right, I think this one's an easy one, or a simple one. Okay, Peter, you have said that clay is the love of your life. You have been working in ceramics since you were a boy, at least since junior high. You studied ceramics at Chouinard Art Institute, took your BFA there in 1970. That was, in fact, the last year of Chouinard before it converted, say, to Cal Arts, and you said that when you emerged with your degree, that your ambition was to be a humble potter. And I imagine, my guess is that that's sort of like a bohemian vision, and that there was a romance to that notion, maybe to the kiln or the apron or the cottage industry, and maybe that romance was particularly alluring because of what I can only imagine was a probably dissatisfaction with some aspects of the culture at large in 1970. But, hold on. So here's my question. Okay, I'm sorry.
That wasn't the question?
That wasn't the question. That wasn't the question. So you had this ambition to be a humble potter, and then two courses emerged from that. One is Echo Park Pottery, which since the early 1970s has produced handcrafted earthenware, largely and most iconically splatter-painted mugs at affordable price points. And also, emerging from that in parallel was Peter Shire, the artist, who has returned time and time and time again to the ceramic teapot. So the question is, this is the question. What about clay comes naturally to you, and what about clay presents a challenge to you?
first of all, how's it going? There it is. I want to take all of that back.
The ambition to be a humble potter? You want to be a mega successful blue chip?
No, I wanted to be adored by women.
Oh.
And envied by men. But yeah, clay, I like the way it smells. Yeah, there's something about the smell, a room, especially in the past when they had damp rooms.
So you've dedicated your entire life to clay because of the olfactory appeal? No, come on.
I had a dear friend named Franklin Konigsberg, and we were both what they called red diaper babies, and which doesn't mean that we had red, meant that our parents were politically active on the left-wing side, and we might have those tendencies because of nurturing. And I once asked Franklin why we liked Asian women, and he said it was our working class tendencies. And I've still been trying to figure that out, but I think that's why pottery appealed to me.
Your working class tendencies?
No, it was, where do you begin and end with that? No, Asian women, come on. It's like part of the culture.
Clay is part of the culture?
Yeah, in Asia, in Japan.
Okay, well, then what are the challenges that clay presents to you?
I think that it's true, that the idea that it was a working, it was a trade. It had a trade to it. It looked like a trade, but it was an art endeavor, and it had like you say, it was, I never know which part of it to talk about, because it's, we get these questions and we have a whole bunch of answers, and one of them that always comes along is that there was this advert for this booklet for Citroen 2CVs, and one of the guys was a potter. And I thought, that's the whole deal. I'll have a Citroen, I'll wear sandals, I'll be a potter, and I'll roll around in the dust and the clay with women. Because how can they resist? Now ask me if it worked.
Did it work?
My wife is still waiting for pottery lessons. At least that's what she says. She had this thing that it would be like ghosts, that I would come and she'd be at the, I'd be at the pottery wheel.
No, we know
Yeah,
you mean.
I never saw the movie. I guess that's the problem.
I mean, if you saw the movie, that would actually seem like a much less romantic scene to you once you realize it's Whoopi Goldberg and Demi Moore. But, okay, I think that's your answer for now. Maybe I'll get a little bit more out of you. But let's let me ask you a different question. Let me ask you a little bit about Memphis. So, in the late 1970s, a Milan-based Italian designer named Ettore Satsas was assembling a crack team of international artists and designers who he believed or hoped might be able to join him in a collective effort to rethink like the calcified reductivist forms of modernist design, to inject levity and vitality into design, to ask basic questions like, why should a table have 4 identical legs, or what's so bad about laminate veneer, to thumb their nose at the protocols of good taste. And Satsas saw in an issue of Wet Magazine, the magazine of gourmet bathing, sort of new wave Bible, some images of your teapots, and ultimately invited you to Italy and invited you to join Memphis, and you did. You were a founding member and presented work in every annual collection for the 8 years, right, 1981 to 1988.
Yeah, more or less. The
most iconic work of Memphis, the work that's on the cover of the Memphis book, is your Bel Air chair of 1981, which is going to appear at least a few times in this slideshow behind us. So would you describe the Bel Air chair for our audience and tell us how you came to it, how you made it, and if you have any insights into why it has struck such a cord?
Wow.
No?
First of all, the Bel Air chair cover is on the American edition of the book. Isn't that great? And well, the way it came was we were given assignments, and they got, Barbara Radice would write, and she'd say something like, "We'd like to have a chair from you." They use that kind of syntax. And so I was doing chairs, and I was doing these club chairs, and my friend Ron Young came, and he was a very funny person, and he said, "Well, what are you doing? You're making both the legs the same. You don't do that." And he started to laugh, and so that, the gauntlet was down, and I was walking along the beach in Malibu, and I saw this house that was like semicircular, and I thought, well, there's the back of a chair, and it also had a lot to do with H.C. Westerman.
Really?
Yeah, because he did all these tables with shark fins sticking out of them, like with little ripples in the water. So I thought this chair will be like a big shark. And then I, at that point I had my studio down on Echo Park Avenue and was very involved with all the local guys. And one of them was named Fernando. They called him Fernie. And his nickname that he gave himself was Mr. Snuffy. and he said, "Hey, did you see my new girlfriend, eh?" And I said, "Yeah, she's good looking." He said, "Yeah, Olga, you should have seen him when Uncle Sharky saw her. He came with his fin out." So I thought, well, my chair will be like that. It'll come with its fin, gliding through the water. And it turned out to be very large, the chair.
It's
as you can
almost
see.
absurdly large.
Yeah, and there's this story by a guy named Edogawa Rampo, Japanese mystery writer who modeled his name after Edgar Allan Poe, was Edogawa Rampo. And so he wrote this story about how this guy was very mild-mannered, and he worked in a hotel, and he really wanted to embrace and caress the women that were checking into the hotel. So he went to an upholsterer and had this chair made that was so big he could get in it. And he spent his days sitting in the lobby inside this chair. So I figured my chair could at least be that, kind of the personification of this gargantuan chair. You didn't hear that one before, did you?
I never heard that one before.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on, and when we do these things, we do them, or I did them, and then they become something, and you start going, oh yeah, I remember. They kind of had that millisecond thought, and so these things are all there, and of course there's stories that I always tell in interviews about getting in my friend's Mustang and the ball. We really wanted that kind of illusion of things, life going on, and also addressing the furniture, where you're kind of going, well, what happens when I sit in it, which you do anyway, but really drive it up the flagpole. And of course the other thing is that ball, which seemed really big at the time. Now it seems small because I've made the balls really outsized, but it wanted to be like a magician's trick where, when they kind of go, whoop, and the egg appears, and it's sort of coming right out of the side of the chair.
I love that. I've never heard that one either. So Peter, is it fair to ask you if you have any insight into why this has been such a iconic work? Why?
Yeah, if I knew, I'd make about 10 more. I wish I knew.
You have made more, and that's actually something that we can talk about, which
maybe it became kind of iconic too, because and this is what we talk about with the whole situation of that moment. The 80s, what was going on in politics with Reagan and things being deregulated, and there being a big sort of a flash of economic boost from that, and then of course a big crash. And I was in New York, and I was with a cab driver in 1987, and he was from some part of Africa, and I said, do you hear any jokes? And he said, no, I don't hear any jokes, man. And I said, what about they were going towards this building that looked like it would be the stock market. He said, what about stockbrokers? Don't they make jokes? And he says, oh, I don't know. And I said, I mean, don't they joke about the market? And he says, oh, no, man, they don't joke about that. So, but it's kind of funny because Memphis came in with this sort of neocon boost, and then went out with the neocon flop. I mean, 87, it was disbanded, and it was, maybe a synergy. I don't think everybody said, hey, the stock market crash, let's quit, because it was in the works about a year before with the conflicts within the business aspect of the group and the, shall we say, the inspirational aspect of the group. But the group, when it was together, was a special thing. Things happen. Certain things are special things. Juzo Itami made half a dozen movies, but Tom Popo is the one where everything came together. The others are great. Anybody would be glad to make them, but that something happens when all the things come together.
And you were tapped into that at the time, weren't you? I mean, you all were.
Apparently.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Well, I guess I was there.
You were aware of the specialness of that moment.
Yeah.
Of that exercise,
well,
of that group,
always,
of the
yeah.
alchemy that made this possible.
Yeah. But not in that way where I, was stepped back from it.
Right. You didn't know that there was going to be a magnet of the Bel Air chair that you could buy in the
I knew I'd made it when
DNA.
it became a refrigerator magnet. Yeah. Yeah.
So, speaking of the Bel Air chair, in 2010, Peter made another version of the Bel Air chair with a slightly different spelling, and this one's entirely out of steel. And then for this show, we commissioned Peter to make a third Bel Air chair, which he's called the Brentwood Chair.
Well, I wanted to say that when I made the chair, it actually had the name that the one you're talking about had, and it was
the Brentwood.
Yeah, well, no, the Bon Air, and it was based on a friend of mine named Lawrence Garcia's joke about making a shifter called the Bon Air shifter. There, you put this bone over a gear shifter.
Femur shifter.
Bon Air shifter. I stand corrected. The Bon Air femur shifter, because yeah. So these jokes are running all through these things where and it's all about bad apartment houses, because that's the kind of the California thing, and I think you're going to ask me about taste, and that starts to enter into it, where these apartments were ridiculous, and they had these fantastic star lights, like bursting stars, and they'd be named weird names that were very pretentious, and one of them was the Bon Air, the Bon Air. So that's how it comes in. Bon Air, Bon Air.
So let's talk about taste, and let's talk about bad taste. I think you know that what interests me, or what I find so compelling about your work and provocative about your work, is the headlong rush towards bad taste. That your work, dives right towards what is trendy, what is vulgar, what is tacky. Not all the time, but say in the case of something like the Bel Air chair. And I think that the provocation is that it asks us to witness ourselves, or it asks me to witness myself mastering those temptations, that it betrays my tastes, right?
That's
my snobberies.
That's what Philippe said too. It really was hard on him.
My snobberies, my pretensions. So.
Well, the funny thing about the Bel Air chair is that, like I said, I was walking on the beach and there was this house, and I thought, that's really corny. And then it turned out to be designed by John Louder.
It's the 1968 Malibu beach house, right?
Yeah. I thought, God, and it had this sort of fan that was a shade, which was, what is going on is that we love these things, and we all love really, as Shaw said, the warmth of the sewer. you know, we love this kind of real stuff and the stuff that powers a bigger section of people. You know, I have a brother. Have any of you met my brother? We got 2, 3.
I've been to his gallery.
Yeah, he's a legend. He's a retail guru. My mother-in-law, who was a buyer for SC Gift Stores, came back one day and said she saw him at the gift show, and there were people that were following him and trying to touch him. That's from an unimpeachable source.
Yeah.
So anyway, you know, in retail they have a expression which is LCD, and that means lowest common denominator. You know, and I, you know, when we talk about pottery and furniture and design and stuff, you're also, you know, delving into the realm of the decorative arts, which really is the domain of sociology and so forth. And so we're also looking to engage more people and this looking for these denominators, but then you're really kind of appalled by it. And some of the, I'm not quite sure how to say this, but the motivations for vulgarity, you know, so are really appalling, and yet you really love it. And so you're attempting to take it in and digest it and produce a better product. You know what I mean? And so that's what happened, you know. And I'm not sure, you know. My memory is that the Italian aspect, the Italian guys, really, you know, come from, you know, I mean, in Italy, my impression from the magazines was that everything is, I mean, everybody's just awash in fabulous design and fabulous houses. And of course, going there, there's a lot of really bad stuff. And if you've ever been to the furniture fair, it's acres of the worst, just, oh God, you can't, I mean, the Maesa makes a Pomona Fairgrounds looks like a one-bedroom studio apartment, you know. It's huge, and it's acres and acres of the worst. But, you know, I mean, you can't even tell the good stuff. It's so dense. And so they were reacting on that, maybe to that. But I think, you know, there was a very high-flown crowd, and they were very upset by the Italian bourgeoisie, who had adopted aspects of post-war design to become very bland. And so there was really, on their end, there was that desire to confront. So they got a guy from California to show them what bad taste is. I was imported.
Well, that's really interesting. I don't think I've heard you before talk about taking what is shared in common, which in some cases are not our most refined impulses or desires, and transforming them, right, to make, as you said, something like the better product. But I'm curious there, in that sort of same line of thought, if it's fair to say, or relevant for you at all to say, that that's something that working in craft or design allows you to do, because the premise of fine art as such is that it's fine, is that it's refined, is that it's lofty and all this, right? If the category or the discipline...
Actually, I was thinking about my mother. You know,
there's a theme.
Yeah, it's a theme. Our mother, and she had wonderful taste. Mm-hmm. She was from Berkeley and was very impressed by that herself. And there's a lot of story to that. And I knew that there was a rebellion set in place right there.
I need more elaboration. What do you mean?
What else do you rebel against? Your parents, and principally your mom, you know. oh, it was, you know, and of course I was going to, you know, to school and high school, and what I always think about that is there was a guy named Henry Jacobs, and he had a suit with, well, everybody was wearing, you know, got a, you know, these beetle-type suits with a narrow collar, and maybe they had a belt, and then some guy showed up with 3 belts. There was a store downtown that catered to this. But Henry had 9 belts. He had 3 on the back and 3 on each side. And he was standing out on the corner of Belmont Avenue and Beverly, letting everybody look at him with this fabulous suit. And my mother dropped me off at school, and she said, I better not see you wearing one of those. I went to Henry and I said, where did you ever get such a suit? He said, my mother made it for me. So, you know, it kind of goes like that. You know, you're going, well, I want to paint that pink. And then you go, no, I can't do that. And then you got to do it.
All right. I like that answer.
Okay.
So,
you want to try for another?
No.
No, okay.
I mean, we'll leave that to our audience.
Okay.
Okay, so I want to ask you, because we're already talking about bad taste, and I was raised by wolves.
They say it's eternal.
I want to ask you a little bit about how you think about the economics of your work. Not obviously to ask for anything too inappropriate, but this is what I'm thinking about.
You mean like how much I actually make?
No,
okay.
But that's probably not irrelevant, but this is what I'm thinking about. I see in your work, and you identify in your work, so many references to early 20th century avant-gardes, to the Bauhaus, to De Stijl, to Russian constructivism. And those were all art movements, the utopianism of which took this idea that design and craft would be the consummation of art and life, and that they would, that design would allow the integration of art into everyday life at a mass, broad, and wide scale. And we know that that's actually something that that Memphis artists and designers also talked about, or aspired to in some ways.
I think across the board in design, one of the call to arms is that it will improve people's lives,
yes,
etc. And of course, I would relate a lot of this back to my parents, and they were involved with ideals of, and to put a fine point on it, the term that they used wasn't lifestyle, it was quality of life, and which is what we're alluding to, that these things would bring a quality of life to people just by the way they're made, etc., and the honesty.
And an aesthetic value, right?
And hopefully, and yes, and that there was, and even an aesthetic value in the honesty of manufacture and so forth.
The truth to materials.
Yeah, and I think that, or I'm thinking, I kind of, this is all new to me, that watching my parents and their group, their friends, that there was, first of all, a certain impossibility, because they even kind of weren't exactly utopian within their interactions among themselves, and that the political climate changed, and that where they were actually able to have strikes and demonstrations and so forth that improved the life of working people, working class people, and also tended to give rise to a middle class. Those things changed, and Marcel Duchamp said, art is like a shipwreck, every man for himself. It's sort of gotten like that, you know, and so that political drive to make things that were for people, and and the identification with those movements morphed into this kind of silliness, I guess, this sort of strange, absurd objects. And we as a group, baby boomers, didn't have the same imperatives. We didn't have a depression. We had a very lush economic 60s and 50s, and we were indulged as children, and so we were looking for how to make a statement and a mark and to talk about our condition, and it became ideas of and demonstrations of sybaritic absurdity.
Sybaritic?
Yeah, sybaritic.
Can I have a translation?
You know, bathing.
Oh.
You know, we're into bathing.
Oh.
You know, magazine of gourmet bathing.
Okay.
We centered around hot tubs.
So how does...
I had one in my backyard. Yeah, I made my own. That's how I seduced my wife to be. So the pottery helped.
So Peter, how does this play out in the distinction between Echo Park pottery and Peter Shire?
Oh, I couldn't give up Echo Park pottery. Oh, in 1979, we went out, and as I said, you know, I have a relation to retail and so forth, and we knew how to do that, and we went to gift reps. I had a gift rep in LA, and I had a gift rep in New York, and they took orders. We made a little catalog, and I got into this situation where I had a show, and not my first show, but with the same gallery, the Janus Gallery, and you know, gave me my first real show as doing artwork and pottery as a statement, and I had two young women helping, and I had a show and I had these orders. And the thing about retail is they have a cutoff for Christmas, and if you don't make your order, you get canceled. So these two gals didn't like each other. Oh, in fact, they liked to not like each other. It was one of those things. And one of them was clearly more competent and could carry the ball, and the other one couldn't. And she basically came up and told me, if you don't fire this woman, I'm leaving. So what could I do? So I'm working on my, and so I fired the young gal, and the other gal lasted about 2 hours, but she had no one to be mad at, so she left. And there I was with all this stuff, you know, about halfway in, I had this, you know, investment, and I did both, and so we were anguished and labored about whether, you know, about Echo Park pottery, and I did stop doing it, but then, you know, for a couple of years, but then, you know, I just kind of snuck in, and the other thing was that I think we did about $35,000 in sales through the gift reps, and I could see that the next year would be more, and I thought, well, if we do this, then all of a sudden, I'm going to be making this money, and it'll overpower my ambition in the other realm. So we stopped, but it kind of snuck back in, and we you know, do a little something here. But we always did just a minimum. And I always thought of it as being like this Erstats factory, which really appealed to me. As sort of a
Say more about that.
well, that, you know, I love the mass production and all of that, but clearly it wasn't. But it had sort of a fake. It had a logo and advertising and a fake aspect of, or quasi aspect of being a manufacturer. And so then I think it was 1992. A friend of mine named Charlie Ruiz died, and he and I and his brother really loved to do Echo Park pottery, and they loved the open house. And the open house, our sale, was what we were taught in school. So it has a very funny throw of being completely related to being a potter and what we were taught in school, and then on the other hand doing exhibitions that have this investment in the art world proper.
Because in school you were taught that you needed to learn how to sell your
Yeah, that
pottery.
was the model of Otto and Vivica. Yeah, to do a sale, which we did. We did them, that was a regime as part of the week. Did that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
I think that we're going to open this up to you, the audience. We have a mic runner, Jerry.
I wanted to ask you a question, if I may.
Hold on, Jerry.
When I suggested the title, Naked is the Best Disguise, what appealed to you about that? But make it brief.
Well, one was your interest in this book that you were talking about, and my sense that you're a very literary artist, and that that's actually what's driving you a lot. Half of what we talk about is what you've been reading. So it was that. Of course it sounds good, but really what it represented to me immediately, this title, Naked is the Best Disguise, was two things, which is one, that my belief, my understanding that, and I've already alluded to this, but that sort of cloaked in the disguise of silliness, you are smuggling a very important, serious, and high-minded idea into your practice about design and about its reach and about its appeal and about its place that to me is connected deeply and importantly to those early 20th century avant-gardes. So one is that, but the other is that there is a constant conversation these days about rediscovering Peter Shire or finding Peter Shire again, when in fact you've been here this whole time on the same stretch of road that you've been hiding in plain sight.
There you go. In case you were wondering. Okay.
So if anyone has questions, we'd love to take them, or Peter would love to take them, and I'm just going to ask that you use the microphone, and that has to do with your fellows here in the audience being able to hear you, but also our audio recording.
Peter, early in your career, you had done a self-portrait piece of yourself in the form of a chess set. Can you tell us a little bit about that piece?
I was naked. It was all penises of different sizes as chessmen, and it was sort of my senior project at art school, because it seemed that all we thought about was sex, and we had the Vietnam War, but that was really going on, and we weren't hungry, so that was our subject, and what more blatant subject than that? So they
Were they ceramic?
yes, they were, and I'll show them to you someday. It never got me girls.
Other questions?
Did that help?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi. Obviously, the work is, it's so domestic. It's all about how it functions in a domestic setting. So I was wondering, from your perspective, when you see it in a museum or when you see it displayed as such, what are your feelings about it? When the first thing I recognized when I walked in, I was told to stay put away from it. So this is like a general inclination to not get put away from it, to want to get really close to it, or to use a teapot, or best at least look at it and be able to function with it. So I know that line is part of the work. How do you feel when you're in a museum space looking at your work?
Pretty good.
You did it.
Yeah. It's a touchstone, and there are aspects of it that are really, quote, usable, and some of them are pretty impossible, but they're touchstones. And they're exciting, and I love furniture. And when I see pictures of things, I like seeing furniture. So I make it, and I make a lot of things. And I'm thinking about that. I like them too. And I like towers, and I like sculptures, but in the end, one has to ask the difficult question, and that is, what's the point? And so you look at some sculptures and you go, God, my mother would have told me to clean that up if it was in my room, you know. And you go, what do people do with that? What, you know, so that a lot of it has to do with giving it a point of departure, if not a reason.
I would just add that from a curatorial perspective, that's exactly the needle we're trying to thread, to at once present the work as it deserves and has earned, sort of warrants to be presented, which is with all of the like respect and customs, which may be arbitrary, right, but they're the ones that we observe of how we treat sculptures, of how we treat fine art in a museum, but to not have that in any way like abridge or eclipse the fact that the work is, I think, designed for the home, that it's designed with the home in mind, that it's designed with daily life in mind, that it's designed work.
And I would like to see something of mine in every home.
And in every museum.
Yeah, yeah. That's my story.
Other questions?
One's up here.
Oh.
This isn't a question, this is a statement. But my name is Jan Turner, and I was Peter's workshop at Rockford's Gallery-based Janice. If you haven't seen something that's very functional, very beautiful, very sculptural, and admired every day, and enjoyed by the children, it's Peter's sculpture of a light fixture, which is at the Colburn School. And please see it if you haven't.
Well,
Thank you, Jan.
That was our last sale, I think.
well, thank you for mentioning that as well. And in the brochure that we've produced for the show, does anyone have one here they can flag around? This one? We've included
But you can't have hers, you got to get your own.
Yeah. We've included a map to some of Peter's most sort of prominent public art installations around the city of Los Angeles. I think we selected about 11 that appear there. So in fact, after the close of the show, 24 hours a day, really, you can see Peter's art in and around the city of Los Angeles. We have a question back here, Jerry.
Hi, Peter, Shannon, Andy what inspired your little bicycle riding angels, acrobats, that group?
For those of you that don't know, one of my leitmotif, am I saying it okay?
Yeah, leitmotif. Yeah, leitmotif.
Yeah, with me it's just late.
Mm-hmm.
It's a unicyclist on a wire. And actually what gave rise to that is, besides, you know, again, after furniture, it's toys and stuff like that. And I was working on a project, one of my first public works, which was for the Wilshire, Vermont Metro Rail Station. And they were showing me the renderings, and it was an underground station. And one of the engineer guys said, oh, and there'll be suction from the trains coming in and out of the station. And I thought, God, wouldn't it be great to have a wire cross, have one of these little guys, and every time the train sucked in, it would pull it one way, and it would pull it the other way when it left. And, well, I imagined that little rider. You've seen them in toy shops when you're a kid. And I asked everybody, I said, yeah, you know, have you seen, how did it work? And everybody says, oh, you know, it had a little more. I said, how did it work? Everybody imagined it had moved, but nobody knew how. And so one thing led to another, and the train stations really didn't have enough suction to move it, and I put a motor on it, and then it, like we say, you know, you imagine these things, but then other meanings start to enter in. And what really came was a love of motorcycle riding and bicycle riding, and that there's a situation of perpetual movement. Because if you stop, you fall over, or you put your foot out, and so that seemed to be a funny transitional moment. It's like when you learn to ride a bicycle, you can't learn by reading it. You just, if you learned like I did, your father, or in my case, my father, someone else behind you pushing the bike, and they've let go without telling you, right? You're doing it. You don't know how you did it, but you're doing it, and you never do know, but you can do it. So that transfer and that imagination was important. And Gordon Davidson, when he saw it, said, it's like being in the theater. You got to stay on the wire, because either way, if you fall either way, you flop.
Do we have any more questions?
Hi. I have a question about people. When talking about your work, a lot of it goes back to a patron or a friend or a muse, and I'm wondering if there's a conscious association between pieces and people, or if it's just because you are so friendly.
Well, people are everything to us. We're people. And I have a thing about that, because, you know, you watch, you know, someone comes in with their dog, and, you know, they're friendly enough, but they see another dog, and they're like, ooh, that's really interesting. And we're really, in the end, we're really interested in people. You know, these other things all lead to that. Joseph Campbell said something to the effect of, we don't really know anything. You know, we don't know where we came from, we don't know why we're here, and we don't know where we're going. So we invent all of these things, these meanings, to give definition and meaning to our existence. And the biggest meaning are the people and the love and the inner relations around us.
I think we have time for one more question, though. That would have been a beautiful place to end. I think do we have one more question? Oh.
Oh boy.
Can we take this question here? Thanks,
Mom, I do better.
Hi, I'm Billy Shire. I'm the entrepreneur that Peter was referring to earlier. And we just came back from the WeHo Shire tribute. And I wanted to know if you wanted to speak also about the Pasadena Art Museum.
Well, I think what Billy's driving at is that our mother's junior high school art teacher was Galka Shire. Yeah, and I have it tattooed right now. Yeah. Our mom had a lot behind her. Anything else?
And the Pasadena Art Museum.
What about the past? Are you talking about Alex? And
yeah.
That's where we went as kids for ceramic classes. You know, Pasadena Art Museum, which was in the Los Robles structure, the Oriental Phantasmagoria. Asian. It was an Asian occasion. Yes, dear. Just yell it out.
Well, no, actually, hold on. We do want to use the mics, Peter, but that's for the audio recording. And then this will be our last question.
You can ask me later.
Leading into that, you said that your mom had a lot behind her. I was wondering if there was any particular person or persons that inspired you or, you know, had your back throughout the process.
Yeah, lots. You know, nobody does it alone. Although some people would like to tell you they did. You know, luck is everything. You know, Napoleon's reputed to have marked up one of the sheets for promotions with notations behind certain guys' names. Is he lucky? And I've been luckier than most. And yeah, there's my junior high school teacher, people. My high school teacher, Mr. Scatia, was really special, still is. And my dad, and my mom, and my brother. You know, we've had my brother's really done a lot to support me, really specific things. And my wife. My dog,
Peter doesn't have a dog.
yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you, Peter.